Hello everyone, I'm Pavel Sigov. I'm a senior project manager with Exactpro, and in this presentation I'm going to talk about MiFID. So what it means for us as a company who's engaged in testing of the financial services technology. And the reason we're doing this is that, this is our subject matter expertise. This is, something that we do, and that's why it's important here, right? Okay, so I will just skip through the contents, I guess, and go right to the meat of this. So first of all, what is MiFID? This is, the Markets and Financial Instruments Directive. That actually is the framework of the EU legislation for investment intermediaries who provide services to the clients in relation to various financial instruments. And also this affects the organized trading of financial instruments. So this is basically the whole chain, affecting the products, the market participants, and market operators, right? So where it started is it was first, came into being as MiFID 1 back in 2007. So it is being increased in scope and basically comprehensively revised to improve the functioning of the financial markets in light of the crisis that we've had there, right? And one of the key items there is to improve the investor protection. And the expectation currently is the changes in MiFID and MiFIR, for that matter, are expected to take effect on 3rd January 2017, right? So this is where MiFID 2 comes in force, right? So what it's made of, right? So it's it's comprised of 2 levels of legislation, and in particular, the Parliament voted on level 1 measures back in April last year, and there's 2 interlinked pieces there, right? So MiFID 2 and the MiFIR, right? So for those of you who are not aware of this distinction between, the difference between the directive and regulation in, European legislative context, I guess I'll save you a trip down to Wikipedia and explain that as directive is something that member states have to implement by approving certain laws that they basically decide, the member states decide how to implement specific direction, right? And the regulation, as opposed to that, it applies immediately, right? There is no leeway given to the member states, in terms of implementation measures, right? So these level 2 legislation bits, right, are delivered in 2 forms. First is the delegated acts, right? So these are drafted by European Commission based on the advice by ESMA. And there's also technical standards, which also are drafted by ESMA and approved by the EC, right? So that's where it is. So in terms of the process, the legislative process involved here, it is basically a trialogue between the European Commission, the European Parliament, and member states. Wait a second. Well, this actually doesn't look right. Maybe just the wrong slide. Okay. So this is the way it's supposed to look like. And, the confusing thing is that when I tried to look into this up, trialogue was not in the dictionary that I used. So I guess I put this together just to, basically visualize what a trialogue would look like. I'm not even sure I pronounced that correctly, by the way. It's not in the dictionary, it's a non-word. So here then is the timeline, right? And these are just the major bits, and we're not going back into the past, right? So the reason why we're saying, for those of you who are following the developments and follow the industry news, right? There's been a lot of chatter regarding MiFID 2 recently, and I guess part of the reason for that is because in September, ESMA actually published the RTS, right? So that's why it happens. Now, the next major milestone there is, we're going to have the drafts of the implementing technical standards, right? And Then in July next year, the MiFID II will be, and this is how it works with the directive, right? So the terms of MiFID II will be transposed into the national law of the member states, and then we'll have the delegated acts also transposed into the national law. And then comes January 2017, where basically this is the end deadline, and those MiFID and MiFIR provisions start applying within the member states, right? So again, this is sort of huge. The reforms that are happening here. This is the most substantial change in the financial services regulation since MiFID I, unsurprisingly. So. These are very wide-ranging, right, and reflect policy concern that will result in a lot of technological development, right, and will have an increase in the complexity of the products and the services, and this is all basically to amend the flaws in MiFID I that came to light as a result of the recent crisis. So the industry is going to be shaking, right? We'll have it reshaped somewhat. So this is what MiFID II and MiFIR, for that matter, is all about, right? So we'll just briefly look at the most significant items. And I have to stress that this is really huge. This is just the top of it, right? So we'll have the changes for commodity derivatives, for transparency, and HFT, and market structure, some organizational requirements, trade reporting, this is big, and conduct business rules and transaction reporting. So commodity derivatives, right? So what we have here is the exemptions that some of the firms have been enjoying from provisions of MiFID I, right? Those are going to be narrowed and or lifted, right? So the energy trading arms of energy firms will have to basically, prove that, in order to continue to be exempt from this, they'll have to prove that their trading activity is ancillary to their main business, basically that they are hedgers, true hedgers, right, as opposed to speculators. Now, the financial instruments with MiFID II emission allowances, are going to be a financial instrument proper, right? So the physically settled contracts for emission allowances will have to trade on a new category of trading venue, which is something that's new with MiFID II, OTS, organized trading venues, right? So then we'll have some position limits. Again, the reason behind this is mostly to limit speculation, right? And position reporting, which also falls, into that same category, right? So what happens is basically any financial firm right now is trading commodity derivatives, right? And they're not subject to provisions of MiFID I. When MiFID II comes into force, they basically will need to decide, if they can continue doing what they do and remain exempt from that authorization, because otherwise they'll have to change some of their business processes, right? And basically consider the implications of, with position limits and position reporting. Now the transparency here. So MiFID I, right, basically applied to equity instruments, right, to shares only. So with MiFID II, this regulation is now being applied to non-equities, and therefore some of the transparency measures that were enforced with MiFID I on equities now apply to those other instruments. And again, this is a huge increase in scope. So we'll have some caps and equity waivers, and this is particularly relevant to dark pools, right? So right now, across EU, the provision will be for dark pool-like activity not to exceed 8% total on an aggregate basis, and also, not more than 4%, right? Because basically, if your volume goes beyond those figures, right, you're no longer allowed to do that. So obviously, MiFID II puts some pressure on dark pools, right? So also with the non-equities now being subject to pre-trade transparency, right? So in terms of full display and everything. And as well as that, the post-trade transparency, right? So what happens here is the key impact is on the trading venues, right? So any trading venue will need to implement this rule and adjust the systems and technology accordingly to be in compliance with the transparency requirements under MiFID II. And also the members, right? The members of those venues will have to, do that analysis also and see, how it affects their trading activities. So high frequency trading, right? So this is where we have a little pain inflicted on the HFT guys, which reflects the popular sentiment. So authorization, for all HFT firms and certain provisions to market making, where basically some of the HFT players will in effect be forced to convert to being market makers, right? There's some discussion on that. So there will also be OTR requirements, right, where the order to trade ratios will have to be set to to a certain value, right? And this is still in motion. It's not finally determined. And in terms of the tick sizes, the exchanges right now in Europe set those tick sizes on a voluntary basis, right? Whereas now with MiFID II, there'll be specific provisions for that, right? And also, in terms of venue pricing, specific controls will be imposed on the pricing regimes to basically ensure fair access to the markets, right? So market structure, here we have a new kid on the block, new type of trading venue under MiFID II, organized trading facilities, right, OTFs, which basically is a European equivalent to a SEF over across the pond, right? So these are, going to be allowed to trade non-equity instruments, right? So, this is basically, in replacement of certain bilateral transactions. Now, the systematic internalizers, that is going to be enforced also, and the most important thing here is the derivatives trading obligation, right? So to implement the G20 commitments and the trading obligations in shares, right? Whenever something is traded in Europe, it has to be traded on one of these. It's got to be a regulated market, a multilateral trading facility, or systematic internalizer, right? So obviously this will affect a lot of the technology that is used by the market participants, and therefore it affects us. It affects anyone who is involved in testing of those systems. Now, the organizational requirements, I guess we're running a little short on time, the guys are telling me, so I guess we'll skip these because these are mostly behavior-driven as opposed to technology-driven. Now, the trade reporting, so some big changes coming down here with the implementation of the consolidated tape, which is, unlike US, is something that Europe hasn't had up until now. So this is going to be interesting also in terms of the projects to implement this, and the CDPs, the consolidated tape providers. This is still in motion. So for starters, it's going to be on a commercial basis, but possibly it will come down to there being a single designated utility type provider, to operate the European consolidated tape. Now, the approved publication arrangements, so we have that also, and this is in particular something where UK was in advance of the continent, because in the United Kingdom some measures were implemented that basically correspond to this new requirement that is enforced now with MiFID II, right? So, okay, this is big for market data vendors, I guess. Now, the conducted business rules, this again is mostly behavior type thing, except for best execution, where this is really to increase the customer protection, right? So right now, with MiFID 2, the brokers will have to prepare some new types of reports, basically detailing their execution practices, not unlike what is happening in the US with SEC 606, I guess, right? Transaction reporting, so again, the scope of the instrument subject to this is increased with MiFID 2, so more reporting will have to happen, and there will be some new data items. Basically, I think right now it stands at about 65, I think, fields to be reported. And this is going to be done via the ARMs, the approved reporting mechanisms, right? So I guess some of that will be covered in the Univista presentation later. So again, a lot of reporting here, a lot of things to test. Now, we'll just rush through the remaining, because I have exactly 0 minutes here. I guess we'll finish here on the key challenges, right? So the challenges themselves are not strictly technological, so it's mostly organizational and project management type thing, just getting all of this. And what we have here is, talent shortage, okay? Because a lot of new projects, will have to happen to implement this. And one item, I guess, that I will highlight specifically is the time clock synchronization, right? So this is going to be something very interesting, to test, because this is sort of complicated. So skipping through the time synchronization again, just to save us time, I guess, most of you can just look this up after this happens. But I guess we covered this a little bit. And where things stand right now, it's obviously a lot of new requirements will have to be implemented, right? And our very own financial conduct authority, right, warns the firms that, guys, you have to get moving on this already. At the same time, I'm not making any bets yet. The recent chatter has it that possibly, quite possibly, the actual date for MiFID 2 coming into force may be moved forward up to a year. There's no talk about significant changes to the law itself. It's just the implementation. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see. MiFID 1, for all that we care, also was delayed somewhat. Right. So to conclude this. Anyone who's doing any sort of testing for financial services firms, us included, has to keep on top of the changes in the legislation and the regulatory and compliance. Be aware with the regulatory compliance scope, which is something that we try to do here at Exactpro for what we do. Thank you so much.